Hi, welcome back to another web development video where I show you how to make modern websites using HTML5, CSS3, and a little bit of JavaScript. I'm going to break from my series called Start With One, where I've been teaching sort of basic web development starting from the very absolute beginning. I'll have a link to that in the description of this video if you'd like to check it out. It literally starts you from no coding experience all the way, I'm hoping, through JavaScript, like basic JavaScript. And so that's been a fun series to sort of go back to the basics and teaching the basics of HTML. In this video, I'm going to show you one of my favorite development patterns, and that is the inner div. A lot of times back in the day, people used to have a wrapper div sort of around their main content that they've written. They would put this wrapper around it to do different things. I've found that with modern patterns, as far as design is concerned, and especially when you're developing for really large screens, and also now that we're using things like Flexbox and CSS Grid in order to control elements inside of a larger section, then this inner div comes in super handy as sort of a utility that I can use to create all kinds of things. I can do maximum widths. I can use it to do flexbox or to put grids inside of this element and center grids, or do different things with the grid on the inside. So let me just show you a few of the things. I'll show you the pattern, and then I'll show you a few of the things that I can do with it. So we're going to start with a section. This could be anything. It could be a header. It could be, I use it for headers too. Maybe I'll show you that. Let's start with that one. So when I do a header, I have sort of something I might call header inner. Let's just call this one header just to set it up. And then on the inside of the header inner, maybe I'll set up a little navigation. This is a pretty common pattern that I do. We'll set up a main nav. Let's say nav menu. I'll try to do this the appropriate way, so we'll say nav main nav. We'll put all this inside there. So we have our navigation element, and then inside that we have our main navigation menu, and then maybe we also have a logo. And so this would be we'll just use a word mark, something like that. So you have your logo here, your word mark, and then you have your navigation items. Now let's go through and I'll show you style this main nav real fast, or the nav menu. You can see that I already have the images set to 100% width. That's for responsiveness. So then now we're just going to say list style of none, and we'll say padding of 0, and we can even do a margin of 0, since we're going to handle margins and things like that with our header inner class. And we also want this to display flex so that the items will be next to each other. And then we'll say these LIs, we're going to put a little margin to the left, since they're all going to be over here. We can put margin to the left, and then that should spread them out a little bit. Okay, and that'll make this edge flush over here. You'll see that in just a moment. Alright, so now we have our logo and our menu, and right now they're not doing anything, they're just sort of stacked on top of each other, but we can actually use Flexbox on this header inner class, and that gives us our first sort of utility that we can do with this. We could use Flexbox or Grid, either one. Either one is appropriate in this instance. And let's come down and do our sort of de-style our logo. We'll say margin of 0, padding of 0, and that sort of gets everything a little bit more lined up here. And then let's jump back into our header inner, and we'll say align items. Since they're sort of different sizes, we need to align them. They're aligned naturally to the start or the top of each element, but we can align them along the center, which is a nice little pattern for those elements. Okay, so let's just save that, and now we have our elements here, and then we can actually come to the justify, and we can spread these out a little bit. This might be the pattern that you're looking for with the navigation right next to the logo, but I often like to justify the content, space between. And what this does in Flexbox is it puts the first element flush to the left, the last element flush to the right, and then this sort of calculates the space in between. You could also use space around, and that'll give it a little bit of it's like there's a line here in the middle, and whatever space on the left and right it needs to take up, it does that. But that's not exactly what I'm going for. So let's do space between, and then I don't really like that it's all like hugged up against everything, because if we come into our header class and we say background color of let's just use a gray color. So now you can see that everything is just sort of hugged up against the line here. As a designer, space is actually going to show that you're skilled with design. This works, and it looks like it will be okay, but when you begin to use space and white space and negative space, it actually shows that you have some sense of design and some sense of control. So if you're a developer and not a designer, that's a little tip, is if you just add just a little bit of space, it starts to feel like, okay, this element has been thought through, and it's not just being plopped down on the page. So if we go to our header inner, we can add a little bit of padding, and this is going to just separate everything out a little bit. So now that you can see, it feels like it has a little bit more of a designed sort of feel. You could even bump that to 1.5 sometimes to give you a little fatter bar. Just preference and to the design, whatever you want to do. So now we have a nice little header bar, and it's using Flexbox, and one of the keys to it is this header inner. Now we can do something like we can set a maximum width on this, because right now it's just going to go as far as the page goes. Let's come in, let's just do a little max width style here. Let's say max 700. So we'll say maximum width 700 pixels, and then when we use max width, we should use a margin of auto with it. You could also use 0 in auto if you want to, and you'll see that it used to go all the way to the edge of the screen, and now well, we have to apply the class, so let's apply it here to the header inner. So we're going to give this inner section a maximum width of 700 pixels. So you can see now that we've set a maximum width on our content, and that's on the inside, but you can see that our box, our main section box, goes full width. So this is one of the key elements, key reasons for using this header inner, is that I can control the maximum width of all the content inside. It's a little bit more noticeable when you get out to a page. So you've seen this before. Maybe 700 pixels is a little bit tight. It's a little bit thin as far as, unless you have a single column layout or something. But you've seen it where all the text aligns to the left, but you still have maximum width elements all throughout. You don't have just a single boxed element where there's blank space over here, but the inside has a colored box. So you don't see that as much as you used to back in the day. We like our images full width. We like our color bands to go full width, And so this is one of the ways that you can make that happen, is by having an outer section that you color or you put a background image into, and then you have an inner div that controls all of your inner spacing, and it also controls your Flexbox and your grid elements as well. So that's one, and let's do another one. It's another type of element that I do all the time, and so we'll say this is going to be called hero, and maybe I want to go hero inner, and inside the hero I want to have an H1 that says, you know, some headline goes here, and then I want to get some text, so I'll come over here and just grab some text. And so now we have our headline, and we have a little bit of text here. You've seen this pattern a lot, and sometimes you'll see a button. You'll see a button down here, and then, you know, maybe in the background there's either a color, or with a lot of hero sections you have a background image. So this hero inner allows us to really get in and style some of these things really easily. So let's say our hero, we'll just go ahead and put a background image on it. We're going to use the Unsplash source.unsplash.com, and we'll say, we'll just give it a nice 1600 by 900 size, and then let's just specify a person. So we want to have a person show up each time in this image. We want this section to be 50 viewport heights, which is like 50% of the page. If we go back into our background property, we can say background size is going to be cover, and we'll say the position is center, and we'll say repeat, no repeat. Don't really need the repeat, no repeat, but I like to have it in there just in case. So now we see that our image, our section is only 50 viewport heights tall, and so once the image sort of exhausts that size, it starts to zoom in so that it can cover all of the space. If you didn't have that there, it would just show you the whole image. Like the whole image would just be taking up, it would be taking up the entire section, which may be what you're looking for, so you get the same look regardless. But if you have cover, it sort of resizes the image to the section. So and then position center, centers it vertically and horizontally in the center. You could also do center bottom, which you can see moves it. So once it starts to scale, it keeps the bottom steady, and it scales everything else that way. Same thing with the top. So once it starts scaling, it scales from the top. So maybe that's the look that you're looking for, especially with an image like this where her eyes, you want to remain in the section. But for most images, they're just sort of there as filler and background, and so you can do center. Alright, and so now we will also want this text here to be centered both vertically and horizontally, and because we have our hero intersection, we can actually do that really easily. So let's also do a color here of white, just so our text shows up a little bit. And we want to come down to our hero inner, and let's just go ahead and just do a text align to the center, and just make sure that that text is all centered inside there. All the elements are going to be centered inside of this. So the H1, the P, and the button they'll all just be sort of centered aligned. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you wanted like a left aligned but a little space to the side, you could do that as well. And on our hero, we need to say display flex, and this is just going to be the easiest way to center something. Justify content. Don't talk and type at the same time. Align items is going to be center as well. So this is going to vertically center everything, and this is going to horizontally center it. So now that you have your text both centered this way through text align, and you also have it centered inside of this larger element, and just having this inner div to be able to do that flex off of makes a huge difference. Let's see, and then you can also you can put a maximum width. So if we do our max width of 700, then we can also do that with our inner div. So now you see that it's centered inside the element, but it's also only a maximum width, the same max width as our inner elements up here. So you sort of begin to create some consistency here, even on a larger size screen. You begin to create some consistency here. And if you wanted to do a second sort of max width, so let's say we wanted to do a max 500, then we would take this, copy it, come down here, and just make this 500 pixels. And then let's say the header and stuff we want to do wider, but inside of these elements here, it kind of feels funny because it is the same size. So maybe it would be nice to have maybe it line up to here. So if we just come down to our element and we say max 500, then when it refreshes, we get a little bit more space here, so it feels like it's got sort of this triangular design feel to it, like you're moving this way, and then you're sort of moving, everything in your eye is moving down toward this element here, which is a click. Okay, maybe you can see it a little bit better here, but you can draw sort of an invisible V shape or a triangle shape here, right? So you have this sort of nice line from here to here that draws your eye. Otherwise your eyes tend to be drawn down the left side. So if you can do something to sort of change the direction that the eye is moving, then you can center everything into, that's really where we want people to look first, right? We're going to see this because it's big. We're going to see this big picture element, and then our eye is going to start to be drawn down this way, which helps everything here to be red. And then from here, you probably want something, maybe center a line that starts to move the eye out this way in a triangle. So you're sort of moving down and you're moving out. That would be a nice pattern to be able to help people move through the website. So this is another pattern that I really like. Let's do one more. This one I use all the time. So we're going to call this one, we'll just call it section because I don't know what to call it. And we'll take our maximum width off of it. And here we're going to have the same thing. We'll have a headline, we'll have this, we'll have a button. We're just going to call this section text. So inside of our section inner, we're going to have a couple more elements, and we'll say section image, and then we'll just make an image in here that says source is equal to same thing, the Unsplash images. Get that right? So source.unsplash.com slash we'll do something a little bit different size-wise, and we'll say what do we want? We want let's just do something like a texture. So that's this image here. You can see they're two different images. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this section inner, and I'm going to call it, we have to do something a little bit different with it. You can see down here that this isn't too bad necessarily, but we have a section image and section text, and that's inside of a bigger div that's going on called section inner. So I want to say section inner, and we want to give it just a background color of pink. And you can see here that this text is showing through. This is taking up the full amount of the space, but the text is showing through, so our background is pink, and we have these elements here that are inside of our div. And what I want to do is I want to take this get rid of that section because it's sort of distracting. So that image is changing all the time. That's just kind of distracting to me. So what I want to do is I want to do a media query. So at, let's say 500 pixels, just so we can see it. So at media, and the minimum width is going to be 500 pixels. So anything over 500 pixels, we're going to say section inner display grid, or display flex. So now you can see that we've been able to easily, at 500 pixels, we've been able to easily go from this sort of block over block over block to a grid section, which is really nice to be able to create a media element, or a lot of times I'll put a max width maybe on this section. Sorry, it's max 700 is the class, and so it does everything until it gets out here. Now I've run into an issue here, so I've put the pink on the wrong part. I wanted to put that on the section, not the section inner, so that we can have our full width color. So we'll just create that as our full width color. So now we say we have another full width color box, but again we're keeping our 700 pixel alignment here, and it's still responsive. And you can do more styling here. You can put a little bit of, often on these sections I'll put quite a bit of padding on the sections themselves. So you can see it probably doesn't need that sort of padding on the edges, but once you get out here you get a little padding, little styling. Again, space is sort of the marker of whether you know what you're doing as a designer, and so you would come in maybe to the section text and create a little space. So we can use padding on this element, and we can just say padding of 1.5 rem. That gives us quite a bit. Our section text H1 is giving us a problem. So anytime you see something like, you see all this space up here, that's because this heading element is getting margin on the top and the bottom. So if you set the margin to 0, now your only margin, there's no margin here, but there's margin with this paragraph element. So it sort of brings everything together a little bit more. And really, for this element, all we really want is some padding in between on the left and the right. And really, you could just make it so that it's only on the left. So now we have still our full width here, but there's a little padding here on this element to the left, and it also doesn't affect the size of the image. So different things you can do. When you're looking at padding like this, you're looking at top, right, bottom, left. So you go like a clock, in a clockwise fashion. you can control each of those elements for margin or padding. Trying to think, is there another one? Not one I could think of off the top of my head, but any of the box model elements you can do that with. So now we have our max width section, and we can control padding with our padding in both. We can do padding and we can do the color, so we get a full bleed color, but we also have a little bit more control of the content that goes inside of that full bleed section, because if you didn't do that, this is what it would look like, which might be what you're looking for. I don't know, but maybe not. So you would have to then take your section element and put the display flex on there. And so you can see when you come out to a larger size, the difference between the two. So here you have this really wide section, and it starts to really bother the text, and so you'll have to really make that text large, and then it busts out of the sort of the left align container for the text that we've set for each section. But here everything is contained a little better. So if you're looking for full width color but contained text as if everything was sort of contained in a box, this intersection div is a really powerful pattern to be able to follow. So just remember that when you have your outer section, it doesn't necessarily need to be a wrapper. You could call it wrapper if you wanted to, but if you just wanted to be able to name each section or give each section even an ID, in Pug ID is just a number sign. Then you could assign IDs to each of these, as well as doing a class for them. So, let's just remove that, and now we can see all of our sections together. So you have this nice header treatment with a maximum width, and then you have this nice hero image also with a different maximum width, because all it requires is just putting a different class on there on our section inner, and we can change the width and sort of control that through the website as well. And then we have back to our maximum width of 700 here, and then this one is just going all over the place. So we get rid of that. You can feel how it sort of comes together a little bit, where we're controlling that space a little bit more. And control is really important, because designers are going to ask you to control the space. They're going to ask you to control the elements on the page, so that if everything is full width, that's probably not what most designers are going to go for. They want everything to sort of be tight and have a maximum width, so that they don't bust out of a certain width, 1200, 1400, 1700, whatever it is for your designer. Probably going to have to deal with that at some point, and this inner div is a really good way to sort of control the inside elements, and also to be able to use things like Flexbox here or CSS Grid, and then you can control that grid inside of that maximum width as well. So one of my favorite design patterns, I build it into almost everything that I do. There are some elements that I don't build it into, but it's very rare. Most of the time our designs at work are sort of required to be inside of 1200 pixels around and about, and so I have to be able to find a way to do full bleed images, but also maximum width content on the inside. So how do you do that? You can put this little sort of a hidden div or an inner div just inside of your main section element that will contain your content and help you to style it better. I hope this has been helpful for you. And yeah, I think that's all that I have in this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up or share it with someone. That would be even better. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I usually release videos. I try to do something every week, and you'll get notifications if you're subscribed when I post new videos. Again, I have a new series coming out, and so I'm posting to that pretty regularly. And if you're new to web design or to web development, or you just want to sort of get back into the fundamentals and the basics, the series is sort of taking a turn toward doing more page structure as opposed to just talking about the individual HTML elements, but there might be something that you learn if you're new to web design. And I'm going to take you all the way from how to set up a page with HTML. So in this video I'm using Codepen, but I show you in that video how to just open Notepad, which is just a basic PC-based text editor, and write code, output it to a browser, and we're eventually going to take what we build, which is a personal profile site, and we're going to put that onto a server online. So I'll show you how to do that, how to FTP, how to just go from zero to having something on the web that people will be able to see, and you'll be able to point people to it. So that's the hope, and I hope that it's helpful to the community, and for people who are especially just getting started, or maybe you have not a lot of money to get into a boot camp or to get into a place that's going to teach you sort of from the very beginning, and hopefully that's helpful to you as well. All right. If you have any comments, if you have any questions about what I showed you in this video, please leave them down in the comments section below. I try to get to them usually within a day, as quickly as I can, sometimes within minutes. Some people are surprised, but I work online, so I'm getting notifications all the time. So if you have something that you want to share or a question, I'm happy to help as much as I can. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.